Welcome back to a new episode of the Stormwater World podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us. Quick shout out to our sponsor, Bloxam & Company. Bloxam manufactures a sediment and erosion control stormwater inlet filter made from coconut fiber that is designed to be simple to install and easy to maintain. The filter is available in pads and rolls, making it easy to customize for a wide range of stormwater inlets. Because it sits over the inlet, sediment buildup is easy to see at a glance, so crews can quickly assess performance without looking down into the structure. Bloxam also offers free samples. To learn more, visit bloxam.com or call 1-800-745-1408. Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of the Stormwater World podcast. I'm excited to have Mr. Ken Kristofferson, founder and president of Stormwater Compliance, with us today. Ken, thanks for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, as everybody knows, everyone gets an intro, so we'll start out with that. We'll do your introduction, and then we'll just jump right into it. So Ken Kristofferson is the founder and president of Stormwater Compliance and brings more than 20 years of experience in stormwater management, compliance, and professional training. He holds an MBA and an extensive list of industry credentials, including QSB, QSD, TOR, TOR, CPES, SEDSEC, SciSec, and WPCM. Any given month, you can find Ken developing between 10 and 20 stormwater pollution prevention plans and managing QSP and QSD site inspections for roughly 150 active construction sites at any given time. Ken is a respected trainer in the industry, providing QSP and QSD instruction for inspectors and designers throughout California, as well as SciSec and SEDSEC training at the national and international level. He also delivers professional development hour training for engineering and environmental professionals. He is an active member of CASQA, serving on the training team committee, and is an IECA Southern California ambassador and trainer, and also serves as vice president of the board of directors for EcoPlant Environmental and is an instructor for both the SciSec and SEDSEC programs. His work reflects a long-standing commitment to improving compliance, advancing professional education, and strengthening the stormwater community. Did I miss anything?
No, you know what? I thought you did a really good job, Ty. I'm impressed with myself.
Well, based on that, based on that information, we could go in a lot of different directions. I think my big takeaway there is that, and what I like, and as this conversation unfolds, is the fact that you're still out in the field, Ken. So, I think there's a lot of trainers that are training from the book, and you're a trainer that not only is training from, I'm sure, great books, but you've got, real world experience and experience today and yesterday, and you'll have more experience tomorrow because you're still out there doing the things. So kudos to that. But I think you wanted to start by going over, or kind of one of our main topics today, if you will, would be controlling the cost of stormwater compliance. Good luck, and how would you do that?
Well, it's a good question with the ever changing, I call it evolving permits. As we learn more, understand more, I mean, we are progressing. There's no doubt about that, but we have a long way to go. And, we're in construction. That's typically, we're tied to construction. We are polluters. There's no doubt about that. But guess what? We can control this. We can control our costs, and we can at least do a reasonable job if we take the right, we're diligent enough to control costs. We can actually be compliant with the world out there, and it doesn't have to impact things. The key things to remember, the first and foremost, key things to remember is that you start out with design documentation that makes sense, that reflects the real world, not something that was invented in an ivory tower somewhere with someone that's never been in the field, because that's really what it comes down to. And I know every complicated job we have, I or one of my other designers will go out and walk the site so we have a better sense of it. A lot of routine sites, it's flat, couple of acres in the middle of and nothing. That's a little different. It's easy enough for us to identify the right BMPs up front, but we're always cost conscious when it comes to what we're going to design. As an example, I take a 1 acre job and I decide, and I used to get sweeps like this from out of state. And they would have the equivalent of a 2.5 foot bag berm around that 1 acre site, which looks really cool on paper. It looks really cool when you build it, but does it make any sense when you're on 100 acres that's totally flat? No, absolutely not. So you're going to come up with something because you're looking at, spending $50, $60 per linear foot of installation. Why would you do that when you could do it with silt fence, get the same result based on the conditions on the site, and for $2.50 a foot, labor and materials. So those are the types of things you consider by having a designer that actually has the field experience, that understands that. And based on not just this company where we do consulting primarily, but the previous company I owned, we did installation. So, I started the company up with partners, and we went out there, and I had to figure out how to make a buck doing this and be competitive and make sure, because I always had this thing about, credibility. I took that very, very seriously because a lot of times I was selling. So the potential of the fox in the hen house, yeah, I'm going to spec out all these bags because, I make more profit. Well, that's probably not a good plan. Not if you want to, continue to do business with those clients in the future. So that is the critical part of that. Now, the next thing is that you have the ability to understand what quality materials, and I'm talking about BMPs. There's so many things you're looking at. The quality of a straw wattle, the quality of that silt fence. Is it commercial grade? Is it mid grade? Is it high grade? And we all know that they use typically the pre-stake versions of silt fence. They have this wonderful high quality hardwood. Not. Yeah. Every other one, you're breaking a stake as you're installing that fence. Well, okay, then you have backup stakes. In making sure that things are installed properly, making sure that the quality of the materials, using commercial grade silt fence, for example, just because it's cheap, if it's in tatters in 3 weeks because of sun and wind, what was the point? And now you're going to have to go out there and reinstall something that'll last a little bit longer. So what would be the point? Again, the quality of materials, that's critical as part of that. Same with fiber rolls. If you're talking a straw wattle, and I know not everyone uses a straw wattle, but in California, we typically, that's more typical. One of the, I want to say, lightweight BMPs. It's the least expensive to install. It's the most flexible, but it's not appropriate for every situation. Not by far. It won't hold up. But there's a big difference between 1.5 pounds of straw, and I'm talking about 1.5 pounds of straw per linear foot compacted into that roll, as opposed to something, that's just, it's just been blowing in. And the only way you get 1.5 pounds of straw is because it's been mechanically augered in. And there are only a few organizations that actually make wattles like that. But then you can do it. And then properly trenching it in and making sure that it's keyed in properly, stakes at the correct intervals. My preference is 4-foot intervals, a 1 foot of overlap, make sure it's perpendicular to flow. All of those key things make for proper installation. We've had instances with, where I showed up on a site and they've installed them incorrectly. And the resident engineer from the, in this case it was Caltrans, he says, yeah, start again. What was the point of having, doing it the first time if you can't do it right? And so that's part of the deal. And so that's the quality of those BMPs. It's just like bags. If you're using gravel bags, right? We have sandbags, we have gravel bags, we have rock bags. And, in a perfect world, if the price was right, I think we would use pea gravel. But pea gravel is an engineered specification. So we typically compromise, at least for the most part in my area, using bird's eye, which is 5/16. It's much more, it's flexible. The problem is if you have excessive silt in the area, they clog up, and what happens? They become the equivalent of a sandbag. What's a sandbag for? It's to create a dam, to keep water in or keep water out. Well, do we want our sites to dry out? Yeah, we want our sites to dry out as quickly as possible, but we want to control the quality of the water leaving the sites. And that's what that passive BMP does on your perimeter. It, slows the water down and hopefully allows it to settle out. And the end result is, what's wearing or working its way through the bag is actually clean water that meets whatever your effluent requirements are. Okay. So that's kind of key. But you look at the quality of the bags. I had a project at one point, we deployed 80,000 bags. This is when I had the other company. 80,000 bags in Yorba Linda, or I'm sorry, 60,000 in Yorba Linda, another 30,000. So it was actually 90,000 bags up in Rancho Cucamonga, up in the mountains. And you know what? I started getting complaints from the folks we deliver the bags to. Why? Because within 3 weeks, those bags, poly bags, had turned to tissue paper. And it's like,
Oh
oh my
wow.
gosh. I purchased 1,600 hour bags, right? Which is, let's call it an ambiguous rating, right? It's like Lux ratings on video cameras, back in the day. Or it's an ambiguous rating because quality control from where we're sourcing the bags may vary from production house to production house. But the point was, they were not. I brought the distributor out and we walked, and the bags were just like tissue paper within 3 weeks. It was
Wow.
good, clean bird's eye we had in them. And guess what? Turned out that it was a marking mistake. They had no UV protection on those bags.
Uh, uh,
That's what happened. I had to rebag 80 to 90,000 bags. Luckily, I had a distributor with honor, recognized the problem, and they provided the product to me free and enough extra to offset my labor of rebagging 90,000 bags. And we didn't
wow.
lose the client, which was, but that's the hands-on aspect. And that happened back in the 03, 04 El Nino. So we had big rains too at the same time. So, you get a sense of this stuff. So the quality of the material, making sure it's clean. Now, one of the things, we hear a lot of pushback, like using straw bales. For the most part, they're not used very much anymore at the federal level and at the state level, unless you're trying to show everybody, hey, look at us, we're doing something.
Oh yeah, you should have seen it. I live in Orange, Texas, and they had my wife and I, we were, as I told you, everybody knows that she's a PE,
Yeah.
and 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 so we're driving in our town, and
Mm.
they had thrown out these straw wattles on some sort of road project they were doing, and it wasn't longer than, and it was just a terrible idea because it was a heavy traffic in it. Just straw. It was straw everywhere, Ken.
Yeah.
It looked like
Was
it,
it on
it looked
hardscape?
like it looked like somebody dropped a straw bomb in our right around
Oh,
the
yeah.
corner from our house. Like it's just all over the place. So,
Mm.
but hey, to kind of bring some of that together, you're talking about controlling costs through
Mhm.
through better design, so the proper BMP, through proper installation. And so let's talk on the third ugly word. How about maintenance? I guess
Right.
maintenance or improper maintenance. What do you see as somebody out in the field? What's the most? What's I hate to be the negative about it, but what's the worst thing? Is it just the wrong BMP? Is it the improper installation that you see, or is it that lack of follow up? What do you think is the biggest
Yeah,
you know
you're getting a
villain?
combination. You're getting a
Yeah.
combination of those very issues. This is the thing about BMPs. When they're put to stress, when the rubber hits the road is when we actually have a rain event. And the bottom line is, if the BMP is installed properly and it's intact, it still only has a limited life until maintenance is required, because the sediment will pile up on the inside of it. And at some point, then the water is just going to flow straight over the top because it's perfectly level. So unless that maintenance occurs. Now, as far as the condition of the BMPs, and that's what I was talking about, you have to ensure that those BMPs are in reasonably good condition, regardless of what we're talking. Silt fence. Well, the key reason we use silt fence is typically because of height, but silt fence isn't always for everything. You definitely don't want to use it in a concentrated flow. And the same thing with wattles. They're inadequate if you have any real pressure on that point. They're the wimpiest of all the BMPs. But again, looking at it, so maintenance, your point is, going out and doing effective, was the third tier, which is effective inspection to identify, the maintenance issues if a BMP is actually working, because we're dealing with this. It's a lot more ambiguous than what I call hard engineering, what your wife does, right? Well, the building's not going to fall down and people aren't going to get hurt because I made a mistake in my design. Where, with a PE, yeah, the bridge is going to come down or something else. The calcs aren't right.
Right,
So
right,
it's a case
right.
of best professional judgment, but it's also a trial and error. And what I found, the jurisdictions that we deal with, and I deal with all levels and including federal, where we have state, federal, county, city, and third party inspectors looking at our projects. And what happens is, and this goes to the fourth point, which is how well those folks actually know what they're talking about. But as far as going out there and being able to tell them, they understand, though, as long as we are making a good faith effort, and that's the key point. It's the good faith effort to try and fix the problem. Okay. And so if we identify that, yeah, I've had inspectors said, Ken, this sampling point, there's no way I can get to that on the drawing. That sample, it's behind a fence. Oh, sorry. And they're in the back of their mind saying, hey, what was Ken smoking when he put the sampling point there? Yeah, we don't want to be there. Okay. So it is a trial and error. But the key thing for us is we have to make sure, remember, your site on a construction site is always changing. It's not a static thing. So your BMPs are constantly changing too. And so as a result of that, you take that, erosion control, we're removing the erosion control. That's the initial. We can't, whether it's because it's a greenfield site and we're going in there and clearing, grubbing and grading, or we're going in there and doing demo for an existing stuff, you're turning it into, hey, you've removed whatever erosion control is there. And we have to have those offsets in the form of sediment control BMPs and other related BMPs. So to offset that and reduce, we don't have to be perfect because BMPs are a trade-off, right? Between what? Cost and effectiveness. I'm going to demo the office I'm in right now. I've got 2 inlets out there. I can guarantee only crystal clear water will go down those inlets when I demo this facility. But it's going to be $10,000 per inlet. That's not realistic. So I'm going to compromise and use bags or some combination of BMPs, and it's going to be $150 per inlet, right? And I will meet good enough
Right.
because the state and the feds require good enough. That's right. It has to be good enough. And that's what it is, cost and effectiveness. That's what BMPs are. So they're not perfect.
Well, it sounds too, in talking not just to you but to other folks, to be a good inspector, it helps to have a little bit of the design knowledge. It's kind of all the
It
way back
does.
to the beginning. um so you can maybe point things out or maybe help avoid things before they become critical. And then you were kind of telling me a story pre-call about a a webinar you were just recently doing. Do you want to talk about that? I think it was for EcoClient, for your relationship
Well,
with
I did one
EcoClient.
for IECA. I did one
Okay. Yeah.
for
Yep.
IECA. Well, actually, for Western Chapter IECA back in July, because California's new permit went 100% live the 1st of September. And what happens is we had a series of webinars planned out to try and inform. And mine was kind of geared towards, it was the first of a series. And it was kind of, I was looking at it from the standpoint of, as owners, developers, contractors, estimators, how do you control the cost of compliance? And so you look at it. Well, first you start out with, you need a good design. Second, you need qualified people. Good design means qualified people too, but you need qualified people doing installation of quality product, right? And making sure you're consistent. The federal side says every 7 days or every 14 days. California says every week. So we have a little more flexibility, but we are much more stringent at the upfront part in our analysis. For example, of what we have to do from a design standpoint, we have to go through this whole risk analysis process, which I'm not going to, for folks that are out of state, that's an integral part of what we do. And by the way, we do SWEPs too in Arizona, Nevada, Texas, Washington State, Hawaii. I just picked up one for Oregon, but the bulk of our stuff is California based. The point being, though, that guess what? I've taught the SISIC class in Nova Scotia at 4:30 in the morning. It's joy, which is fun for me because I actually enjoy dealing. I get like 30 people in this class and going through, and the only difference is I'm no longer referring to EPA regulations or the U.S. or state construction general permit. I'm dealing with the Canada's construction general permit, and then their provincial interpretations of those. And they're taking the environmental stuff fairly seriously up there. So it's kind of a fun thing to deal with. So I had some good conversations, and I do speak Canadian. So having come from there originally way back 100 years ago. So I do speak Canadian. But anyway, that being said, it was just a fun experience to find out that, it's that old idea about people. I've lived and worked all over the world. And what I found is regardless of where your head is, politically or religious or anything like that, we as a people, okay, and I'm talking about human beings, we have more in
Right.
common than we have different. And that's reality. So, so I think, it's kind of fun looking at that. And I always enjoy working with folks from other places. I get some of the most interesting questions from Malaysia, or other places, or Australia too. And I've had some pretty good technical conversations with people on how to best help them meet their need. So
Well, that's
it's kind of fun.
that's a good
Yeah.
segue into the next point that you wanted to discuss today, which is water and air quality are critical to a thriving, successful society. Do you want to unpack that for us?
Yeah. I look at this and, I have been as guilty as anybody out there. I'm a reformed smoker. I quit when I was 26, but, I went to sea at 16.
Well,
So I
that
smoked
wasn't
from
too long.
16 to 26.
That
Yeah.
was just a few years ago, right, Ken? I
Yeah.
mean,
Just a few years ago. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Like,
some of these
yeah.
folks, they may not be watching on YouTube. They might just be listening. So we can play into that.
The point though is I smoked. When I gave it up, I was actually in the United States Air Force. And you know what? What I'm trying to say though is, becoming conscious of what your environment around, this idea of not in my backyard. We have to be able to breathe the air. I mean, you guys have seen the pictures from Beijing or from Mexico City. It would be that way in LA had we not reformulated the gas and put a California build on our cars, right? You would not be able to. You have little old ladies passing out. When I first came to California, which is, 40 years ago now, it was that we were still having smog alerts and schools closing and things like that. We don't have that anymore. And there's a heck of a lot more cars 40 years later than there were then. So we are doing some good. We are doing some good. As far as water, it is also a finite resource. And I was reading a couple of articles the other day. They're talking about water potentially from a life. You can have all the gold in the world, but you can't drink it, right? You cannot drink it. And so if we can't get at the potable water, or there is no potable water, meaning drinking water,
Mhm.
that's problematic. So we're fighting the good fight as part of this process. And that's kind of where, I take that, and that's what I try to enthuse my employees with, is that, we're doing good here. We can feel good about the job we're doing. Our job is pretty limited from an authority standpoint. What's our authority? Yeah, you need to be doing XYZ. Okay. Maybe I'll do that XYZ. Our job is to convince that contractor. We have to make it show it that it's in their interest to be compliant, because the stick is really big, and the carrot may be a little more ambiguous. The fact that you're going to have clean water to surf, to swim, to fish, to drink. Okay, that's a good thing, but that may be a little, ambiguous out there, and hey, a little fuzzy out there. But they do recognize that, oh, that big stick, if they get hit with a fine for 10K, I was doing this analogy the other day. If we're $10 per gallon a day of contaminated water, discharge. I look at 1 acre, 1 acre, 43,560 square feet. And I look at that and I get an inch of rain on that, and that's not protected. And I run and send a nasty slurry of, something greater than 250 NTUs off that site. Now I could be subject to that. What does that add up to? Oh, about $70,000 a day. Ouch. That's going to make an impact. Unlike a library fine where, you take the book back 6 months later. Yeah, that's $5.32 in fine. It's nothing. That's one of the, it's one of the paradigms. You guys ever read Freakonomics? It's really good. They run a couple of good analogies like that on compliance related stuff like that.
Wait,
So
can you still go to a library and check out a book?
yeah, I haven't for a while. All my stuff is on Amazon, which is really a
Exactly.
shame
Yeah,
because, yeah, brick and
yeah,
mortar stores
exactly.
are, but that's another thing. Yeah, the convenience
But
is,
yeah, see, I'm old. I mean, I'm old, so I get the library analogy. But there's probably people. It's what's sad or funny or however you want to say it, right? There's people
right.
listening to this podcast that have no idea about what the stress of getting a library book back on time.
Well, when you're a kid, where it hit home is when you were renting DVDs, right? Back when you were renting DVDs because before we had streaming, and you go in there and suddenly the fines were $1 a day. Oh my gosh, if you were late.
There are people that listen to this that have no idea. They have no idea that Netflix used to send DVDs in the mail, and
Uh,
they have never stepped foot in a Blockbuster. I
yeah,
promise you,
yeah,
there's people
and
that listen to this have no idea what we're talking about right now.
right.
They've only seen, like movies that are like, what are those people doing? Oh, they're walking through a video store and they're renting a VHS tape. They're going to take it home, watch it,
Yeah,
and if they don't rewind it, they're going to get in trouble.
yeah. What was that sticker on it? Be kind, rewind. I remember the Blockbuster days. Yes, I
So
do.
we are so off topic. That is so
No,
funny.
no, no. I get it.
But hey, but no, it's still a good analogy. I mean, I feel like sometimes the stick isn't probably big enough. There's just not enough enforcement, which is why your job becomes a little bit more difficult in the fact that you have to become a persuader of all the
Right,
things that people should just want to do, you know, anyways. But I think people it's hard, right? It's hard for
right,
people to draw that straight line to, oh, I threw something down that drain there, and when I drive, this weekend an hour from my house and take the kids to the XYZ, and they're like, oh no, you can't fish today. Why? Well, because of it's closed because of whatever issue. You can't get in the
right,
water today at the beach because of whatever
right,
issue.
right. Yeah,
I think
what do you call it? Yeah,
we're so wrapped up in our own little lives that we don't realize the impact, right? I say this almost every time. We've got wastewater figured out, right? Like you
we
flush your
do.
toilet,
Well,
you get to forget about it. But if your toilet clogs up, then you care,
I know.
and then you only care about stormwater when your
Hmm.
house is flooded.
Yeah. No,
And
no,
so that's what
exactly, exactly.
so
Well,
that's
have,
my goal is like, how do we take this podcast or how do we take the conversation and turn it inside out, right? Because we
yeah, no,
talk to
it's
each other.
true.
We do make some headways and we talk to each other all the time, but then how do we get everybody else to care? Like
Right.
everybody
No.
else meaning, the people not directly in the industry, because
Well,
if we got them
exactly,
to
exactly.
care, then
Yeah.
it would be perfect. 'Cause
Well,
then
I
everybody
have
else
talked.
wins.
I have talked to Shauna and the board several times about this. And one of the things, they,
Wait, now
and I
you mean
said,
the board, for the listeners, he's talking about the board
eco-pliant board, right?
compliant.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But
Go
what
ahead.
I'm trying to get at here is that I can still remember. And Ty, you're not old enough, but I am old enough and you know it probably from looking at historic archives. But if you remember when Iron Eyes Cody rode his canoe into the, do you remember those PSAs back in the day? You know what I'm
No,
talking about?
no.
I will send
My
it to you,
oldest
my friend.
PSA is Smokey the Bear is my oldest PSA.
Okay, well, yeah, Smokey was
Smokey the Bear.
around too. Well, okay, but
I'm
old
older than
Iron
I
Eyes,
look.
yeah, old Iron Eyes Cody. He's dressed in full native garb, as in indigenous
Mhm.
people's garb, and he's rowing his birch bark canoe into this area, pristine, beautiful forest and deer and birds and everything else. And suddenly you see him; he's in a bay, and it's all industrial smoke going on. And he pulls his canoe up on the beach, and he's standing there, and somebody throws their McDonald's trash out of the car and it lands at his feet, his moccasins, and he turns towards the camera and a tear rolls down his face. I was 14 or 13 when I saw that. It made an impact on me.
I
Okay,
think I
I'm just
saw.
saying.
I think I saw that episode of Bugs Bunny. Hold on, it gets better. No, I don't remember that. I do
Yeah.
remember an episode of Bugs Bunny that I feel like had something similar, but it
Okay.
stopped before
May have done a parody of it.
before the trash hit his feet and the tears rolled down his feet. But man, yeah, we don't have any great champions like that today in 2025.
I know. Well, my point that I was trying to say, and this goes to your point. No, no, my point I was trying to say, though, going to your point before about making sure the greater public is informed, this is
Yeah,
where, those young teachers that are zealots are teaching our kids. and they bring that home, it builds a conscience, and everybody, it raises overall awareness. Because, anyone that's traveled in other countries, that it's going to differ. I mean, Canada is very similar to here, but you go to other places in the world, not necessarily Western Europe, at least Northern Western Europe, but other places in the world, and you're going to see folks that don't care. But they don't care why. But they don't care because they don't know any better. They've not been trained about it. And, we've seen some of the stories about Southeast Asia where you're looking at so many plastic bottles in the riverway. They can't even navigate that riverway when, and their life is based on boat traffic in and out of that village or whatever. And so, I think that global awareness is really critical. When I've talked to the Australians about this, they have a whole thing between Australia, New Zealand, and I guess Pacific Islands. And they basically have an association that's dealing specifically with these issues related to stormwater. So they're trying to raise the bar there. Europe, the same thing. I can still remember being, my wife and I took a train from Vienna to Melk to go to the Abbey at Melk, which is really a cool old thing. And we were wandering around there. And then we had a cruise down, for an hour or two down the Danube. I just remember how Danube ain't blue, it's brown. But there was construction right there. And I'm looking, where the heck are their BMPs? I'm in the heart of, Austria, Western Europe, and they're lacking BMPs. And so, I actually went over and talked to the superintendent in Pidgin, Austrian, German.
Oh, okay. Was he able to explain?
I said,
Were you able to ask? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I did. I did. I said, what the heck? He says, yeah, we're supposed to do it.
Oh, okay.
But we're supposed to do it, but we're on the Abbey grounds and nobody's calling us out on it. Okay. That was basically the gist of my understanding. So it's no different than we go from state to state here. You see, the rules are on the books here too. I go to Utah and places, I see, things that Colorado, same difference, Texas. I look at the BMPs every time I come to Texas. You guys have green silt fence there. I don't see that anywhere else that I travel typically, but it's kind of fun to do that. But going back to this idea of controlling the cost of compliance, I look at it as we look at the designer, we look at the quality of the materials that the BMPs, the quality of the inspection, and the quality of inspection is directly tied back to how well those folks are trained. Have they only been trained theoretically, or have they been trained so they're field ready when they get out? And to be able to identify. When I teach classes, I typically come from the standpoint of, and this is me being a photographer from way back when, is developing their eye as a photographer, developing their eye as an inspector to see what's going on here, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then being able to identify, does this need different? Do I need to talk to the because it's ineffective or it's compromised? Do I need to talk to the designer and come up with a better plan B? And also, hey, what's upstream that could potentially, help minimize this, mitigate what's hitting this, this one point in time, this photograph, or this actual, I'm looking at this, and then making sure that you're going and investigating that. It's a key thing is that from a critical thinking standpoint, looking and asking those questions is really, I think, essential. So looking at your actual BMP, identifying the good, bad, and ugly, and then stepping back and say, okay, what's the source of this? Oh, and by the way, what's the impact downstream too? Is there more downstream I need to look at? And understanding that. That's the nature of being a good inspector, is being able to ask those questions. And then also having a good enough relationship. My best feedback, and this is from a design standpoint, my best feedback is a well-trained inspector. That can, and there are times when we can do it on FaceTime, or there are times when I have to physically go out there and look at the issue and size it up. And I have one of those situations that I have to deal with. I'm dealing with on Monday. Actually, I had two of them. I had to deal with up in LA on Monday, and in both cases, high-profile projects, and they have some real problems. So, but it takes me stepping into it, or one of my designers stepping into it, for us to be able to go out there and come up with a solution. The key thing, though, is then making sure your documentation is accurate and effectively communicate. As we teach it in SISIC, make sure you understand it, and it needs to be articulate enough that, short, clean, succinct bullet statements of what you're seeing, what the issues are. Remember, as an inspector, you don't have the ability to mandate change, but you can identify problems and you can make suggestions on how to fix those problems. But remember, from a liability perspective, you don't want to take that on your shoulders. The way the city inspector, they're not going to tell you, they're going to say, that sucks. You need to do something different.
Yeah, you
So,
mentioned the training and stuff, and and of course you mentioned SciSec, and I think that the thing that makes SciSec stick out or stand out, other than some of the training, because I ran into this when I got into the industry.
mm,
So I got involved in 2012, and so I used to sell compliance software for MS Force,
right, right, right.
and for them to help, together all their data, GIS information, and everything. And prior to getting into the industry, I'd gotten my lead designation, and so when I got involved, I was like, oh, okay, so what's out there? And what I realized is that you have to kind of jump through some hoops, right? You have to have so much time in, or you have to have an advanced degree or whatever, which I don't
Right.
have. And so what I like about SciSec is you can actually get the training you need,
Yeah.
prior to having the full qualifications to carry the credential, which is crucial because it's the, you know, which came first, right? The
Yeah.
chicken or the
Chicken
egg,
or the egg?
right?
Yeah.
Because you,
Yeah.
you hear people say, well, I can't get a job because I can't get, oh, you need experience, but then I can't get the job because they say, oh, how do I get the experience? Well, I think what SciTech has done is said, okay, cool, you're trying to learn. We're going to get you that learning. We're going to get you that education that you
Right.
need to be better at your job. And then
Right.
as the clock ticks, the benefit that you get is that you're part of the ecosystem now. So you're,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
getting the ongoing, ongoing
Absolutely
benefit.
agree. Absolutely agree with you.
And then when the time hits or whatever, now you can take the test and you can put the letters. But wouldn't you like to have the knowledge? Wouldn't you like to be good at what you're doing instead of having
Right.
to just learn from all these different places and then hope you're doing the right thing
Right.
and then
Right. Right.
stubbing your toe along the way. But and of course
One
I'm
of
sure you could speak to that
Right. Well,
better than me.
one of the things that I've been really pushing for, and we actually have established it, it's still a work in progress with EcoPliant, is something called Institute.
Hmm.
And basically, Institute, the idea is because the exact issue you're dealing with, if they're my employees, I know how to take them through the various levels of classes. I can teach them and get them fully
Of
qualified
course,
precisely.
you're a trainer.
Yeah, and do that. And on top of that, we're walking with them, mentoring them. They're following us on doing inspections, so we're giving them the field experience. So then they have to conduct it where they're supervised. And then at that point, when I feel they're ready, then I turn them on, onto their own route, right, to do inspections. So
Right.
that being said, one of the things because I transitioned into this industry coming out of the bigger consulting world where I was on an airplane every week prior to 9/11, going somewhere in the country, working for a large technical training and engineering firm, one of the biggest in the country. And I was business development, but I had to be, what's the word, knowledgeable, because we were in a dozen different market sectors, and an inch deep but a mile wide. Well, I loved it because I had an unlimited book budget, as you can see behind. I have a lot of books. I read a lot. And my point being though, when I got into this business, I was so hungry to learn all the steps going through, and there did not seem to be a clear path to do that. And so what my vision is that with EcoPlant's Institute program, what we're going to do is we're going to have a fundamentals group where you can go in and spend an hour learning about everything there is to know about silk fence, from installation, maintenance, and inspections, and then another one on silk fence, another one on fiber rolls or various erosion control, hydromulch, hydroseed, whatever, and going through all those building block classes. No different than going into a college, a JC program, and hey, this is your general ed baseline. And then what happens is you may be in training status, but at least you're capable. You know what you're talking about. And we sum all that up and we use these as ongoing, credentials. And then on top of that, you have your upper tier stuff, which is the more advanced classes. We're going in we're doing a class on Russell too. Or we're going in through an old school rust, or we're doing a class on muscle, or whatever the calculations we're running here. And erosion control techniques, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So those sorts of things. So what you're doing is going in and basically giving them advanced classes that are current and relevant, as opposed to some data. With drone inspections, how to do that effectively, where are the limits, and we'll make sure you've got your commercial, license for that. Yes, right.
1098, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And
Part
I'm
A.
working on mine. I'm still working on mine.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point
Me,
being, though,
me too. And I never take my drone out.
yeah, hardly ever. Well, you can do it privately as long as it's registered. As long as it's registered,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Moving
So,
on.
yeah. The point, I find it really effective on some of the bigger jobs, though. That you can take that out and do some, audits on stuff as long as you meet the, the legal requirements. But anyway, that being said, the point is that you have these, now you have a pathway, because that's what's been missing in the process, I think, is a clean pathway to getting from, hey, I just graduated from high school, I just graduated from college, how do I get into the business? And
Right.
having a clear path. Hey, here are the steps. And it can be self-driven. You have on-demand classes through an LMS. Wow. And you just need somebody to map it out for you. And yes, that's
Right.
what we're attempting to set up. So that way, what I've basically done in practice for my company, for my own company, with my people, we take that to the bigger national, international market and say, hey, these are the building block fundamentals. Oh, and by the way, advanced skills or refreshers. Here you go. More obscure topics areas. Great. Get into that. What else you got?
Oh, I don't know. I think we're kind of wrapping up at this point. What did we miss is the question, Ken. What did we miss that you want to make sure the listeners know about you, CalStorm, SciSec, and EcoPlan, all the things that you're involved in? How do you want to wrap this thing up and put a bow on it today?
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. I am one of those true believers. Not necessarily a hardcore, as we talked earlier, a hardcore tree hugger necessarily, but I do appreciate the beauty and things. I also appreciate the fact that we have to continue to progress as a nation, as people. We're a work in process, right? And progress or process. Anyway, regardless of that, we can all do better, and that's really what it comes down to. Whether it's yelling at my kid, the youngest back in the day, because he would leave his lunch truck trash in the back of the truck where the gulls could get it, whatever it is, whatever we have to do, not emptying your ashtray out except in a trash can. I mean, there's nothing nastier than walking down the beach and here you have medical waste and how'd that get there, and or cigarette butts on the sand. It's just gross. And on top of that, it's highly toxic stuff too. So do we want to expose our kids, our progeny, to this stuff? No, we don't. And so taking and stepping back and say, yeah, we want to breathe the air. We want to drink the water. We have to do that by being publicly aware. And my hope is that at some point we can start launching some PSAs at the younger generational level and start bringing this back in line with where it should be. We're not talking about shutting down industry. We're talking about, again, industry, they just need to be responsible to do what they're supposed to do per the regulation. And just because someone's not looking at them, because they're not regulated, even though it may be human nature, we the public need to hold them accountable, right? So again, it goes back to, for us in the industry, we're looking at it from the standpoint of, hey, we are the representatives out there. Call us missionaries, call us whatever you want, but we're the representatives because we know this is going to lead to better quality of life for Americans, Canadians, the world.
I think that's a good point to wrap up on. Everybody do better. And if you want to get hold of Ken, we're going to link all his contact information in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about his company, CalStorm, we'll have that listed as well, along with if you're interested in what Ken was discussing about EcoPlant and their offerings, we'll have that linked in the show notes along with everything else. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. We appreciate you. I know that we just scratched the surface in this little bit of 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and that you've got plenty of things that you could talk about in great depth. I'm sure you can not only just go, a mile wide and an inch deep. I'm sure you can go very deep on a lot of topics. So this may become a thing. Keep an eye out. We may, Ken will probably be on in the future as well. So if he's willing. So,
I would like to make one point. If those that are listening out there, if you have topics, issues that you're seeing, things that you're seeing in your states that are not working related to stormwater, then please, let Ty know. And so, these could become the some of the topics we've discussed, because there are ways of us moving the ball forward on this stuff. So
yeah,
it's all about awareness.
That's what it's for. We're trying to get the word out. Ken, thank you so much for being on the pod.
Thanks, Ty. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to our sponsor, Bloxam. Bloxam offers a coconut fiber stormwater inlet filter designed for simple installation, easy maintenance, and clear visual performance on site. The product is available in pads and rolls and can be customized for a variety of inlets. Learn more at bloxam.com or call 219-363-0206 or 1-800-745-1408. We'll see you on the next episode.